the recent visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the 4th of April to the 6th of April to Sri Lanka is one of the brightest moments of India's neighborhood first policy in the recent years. The reason I say this is because President Anura Dissanayake does not come from a very pro-India faction. In fact, he had a history of being affiliated to JVP. He comes from the JVP party, which has had a very strong anti-Indian stance since the 1960s. Now, in fact, in the 70s, they had the first insurrection against Sri Lanka. They launched a civil war. In 1980s, they launched the second civil war, and the second civil war was mostly against India and India deploying its peacekeeping forces in the 1987. So that shows, the anti-Indian sentiments that were prevalent in Sri Lanka. And today, when we saw in September 2024, when we saw Anura Dissanayake being elected to power, there was a major concern about the direction that Sri Lanka would take and the relationship how the relationship would be impacted between India and Sri Lanka. But luckily, what we have seen, or diplomatically, what we have seen, is that there has been a careful nurturing of this relationship between India and Sri Lanka, especially since 2022. There was a significant assistance that India provided with $4 billion US assistance, and that has led, a non-partisan kind of a bonding in Sri Lanka, in a non-partisan kind of understanding in Sri Lanka, that India is a good development partner. India is the country where we have to bet if we have to get our economy to recover, if we have to get our economy to be integrated, and if we have to get our economy to grow. So I think this realization has taken over across party lines. And when Anura Dissanayake was elected to power, he saw that India stood with the $4 billion assistance when other countries were hesitating to even invest any money or give any money to Sri Lanka. India was a major partner who did that. So I think there was a realization in the JVP and Anura Dissanayake that India is, a major partner who will stand there for Sri Lanka regardless of what it is. Now, the second realization was again that Sri Lanka should recover economically. Sri Lanka should grow economically, which means that you will have to tap on India's technological base, India's economic base, and deeply integrate yourself with South Indian economies. And I think this is rather been a strong realization, and we are seeing both the countries go into that direction. In fact, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake has on the multiple occasions said that, Sri Lanka's economic prosperity is linked with India's economic prosperity. So this visit, I think, has led this relationship into the positive direction, which earlier, while we used to see some tensions persisting to Tamils, persisting to Chinese presence in the country, but I think at least for now there is a realization that regardless of what China has to say, regardless of other irritants that are, there is one direction that India and Sri Lanka relations can go, and that is in the right direction. And I think India is also realizing that one good way to go ahead with this relationship is in fact to be more accommodative of Sri Lankan interests and concerns. And I think this visit rightly puts India-Sri Lanka relations on a very strong basis and a very right direction. We will continue to see such developments in the future. While there will be some irritants, needless to say, there will be some concerns. But we think this is in a redirection, and the relationship is yet to blossom as we are seeing it unfold in the coming days ahead. Now, the importance of this bilateral visit is, first thing, I think there has been a realization on the Indian side that we don't have to burden the Sri Lankan economy. We don't have to push for more debt-related growth or debt-causing growth, but we can push for more investments, private investments. We can push for grants. We can push for joint investments where it helps the Sri Lankan economy and the people. Now, in fact, India signed 7 MOUs recently. Some of it also include the grant assistance. Some of it also include the joint ventures. Some of it also includes refinery, bringing up oil and energy security into Sri Lanka. So India is realizing that one major aspect of cooperation is energy security, and that will not only help Sri Lanka be resilient to external shocks, but also to generate revenues whenever necessary by exporting its energy surplus. Now, this is one realization. The second realization, I think, especially on the Sri Lankan side, is the fact that Indian and Sri Lankan security are quite intertwined and interlinked. So they don't really have to, there was a realization that, we don't have to let the China and the Chinese factor continue to disrupt India-Sri Lanka relations. In fact, Sri Lanka has now understood that if we keep on catering to Indian sensitivities, this is the best way. This is the best way to build upon our relationship and trust. The Sri Lanka side, in fact, shows this very strong indication that India-Sri Lanka relations are moving forward. There was a lot of skepticism. In fact, in 1980s, this was the same party that created a lot of civil unrest in the country when India and Sri Lanka signed defense agreement. But now this is the same party again which has gone ahead and signed the defense pact, which says that the trust for India is growing. The bilateral cooperation with India is growing, and this also shows that Sri Lanka is growing increasingly sensitive to Indian security concerns as well. So they are rather trying to say that we will continue to do our best to not to make sure that your interests are not harmed and your country is not being targeted by the Chinese spy ships or the Chinese vessels. So I think this is a strong indication. Now, finally, I think Kannada Digital with this visit has also laid a strong base, in fact, a very strong orientation that India-Sri Lanka relations will continue, especially on the personal leadership level connect, with him offering the highest civilian order to, the award to Prime Minister Modi and visiting India first and now inviting Prime Minister Modi to Sri Lanka. I think there is a broader understanding that one best way to build this relationship is to foster that political relations and political ties, and that's where the future of India-Sri Lanka relations remain.